Good morning. Today is Tuesday, February 23rd. This is PLAR History and Geography here at WASA, here in Sulako. We're entering week 3 of term 2A. Yes, we're on week 3. Okay, remember this is a 9-week term, so we're at week 3. We are progressing. We are moving along very nicely throughout this course. Again, my name is Jonathan. I am your teacher for this course. I noticed that we got Fort Hope listening right now, which is great. Again, feel free to join along, whether you're at your home or in your community, as we look at Canadian history topics today. Again, this is PLAR History and Geography, where we will be looking at history topics first, and then around week 5 or so, we'll switch gears and change subjects to look at geography. Okay, so remember, this is PLAR History Geography. Again, my name is Jonathan. Nothing new, no announcement to announce. Again, always want to emphasize, continue to work on those assignments, whether you're almost done or a brand new student or just have started or in the process of writing your tests. Okay, just continue to chip along and work on those assignments. Again, at all points, feel free to listen and participate throughout my lesson. Again, feel free to give me a call during my office hours if you want to say hi, if you want to know how you're doing in your course material or your marks. Fax me your assignments, email me your assignments, get your DUC to scan it, send it to me. Facebook, email, doesn't matter. Okay? Or if you want to stop by my office here at Waston Sulako and say hello, that's great too as well. Okay? Are there any questions before we begin today's class? If there are no questions, we shall begin. We're gonna just start it. So last week, class, we looked at lesson 1, Canada in the 1920s and Canada in the 1930s. Okay, we started this lesson. We did not finish this lesson, which is okay. So we're gonna finish this lesson today. At the end of today's class, which means lesson number 1. Yes, lesson number 1 will be finished. Will be finished. Okay, and then we'll be looking at questions on assignment number 3 as well. Okay, so I just want to finish off what we talked about last week. Okay, remember, boom, our learning goals for this lesson was that by the end of this lesson, that's right, you will be able to demonstrate an understanding of what happened in Canada during the 1920s to the 1930s. 2 decades. 2 decades. So our learning goal, remember, we're looking at the decade of hope, which is the 1920s. We're going to look at the Great Depression, what that was all about, how that started, and how that impacted Canadians during that time period of the 1930s. Okay, a lot of talk about struggles and challenges throughout this lessons, especially challenges and struggles that Canadian citizens had to overcome. And then once again, we'll be looking at women history. Okay, very unique topic. We're exploring women history as historian. We're going to be looking at what they wanted to do during this time period, especially the right to vote. Okay, right to vote. These are our learning goals. These are our topics. Keep that in mind as we move along throughout this lesson. Again, the first few slides we talked about last class, so again, I'm going to go over them, and then we'll start what we left off last time. So, the 1920s. So remember, we talked about how Canada was created. We talked about Canada in the early 1900s. We talked about Canada going overseas and fighting in the First World War. That's now all done. We're now in a brand new decade. Decade of the 1920s, also known as, or I like to classify it as, a decade of hope. It was a hope. A time of excitement, time of prosperity, times of good times. Okay, again, this was exciting times. The war is over. People are coming back home here in Canada, so this was an exciting decade. Upper or middle class citizens in Canada, especially those folks, it was a very exciting times. Times of opportunities. Things started to change, and they had the wealth and the income and the money to purchase these new opportunities. However, as we talked about, poor or working class citizens, it was time of disappointment, uncertainty, and insecurity. They did not know what the future holds or what they could afford or what they could not afford. Okay, so even though it was time of excitement, time of opportunity, some afforded, some could not. Okay, Canada was really divided into classes based on economic status. Okay, whether you're a man or woman, it applied to all upper, middle, poor, working class. Okay. 1920s again, a period of increased jobs, industry. Okay, jobs start to open, especially if you're living in major cities such as Toronto and Montreal. Okay, towns, cities, homes, urbanization started booming, started popping. Homes started were created. People were coming from left and right. We had new inventions such as the telephone by Alexander Graham Bell. We had the automobile industry, cars. Okay, cars such as companies such as Ford, for example, started to make cars at crazy rates. We also had the invention of the radio, where you can listen to some fancy music and people talking, such as myself. We have increase of electricity, which means more hydro and more opportunity, more energy. We also had advancement in medicine and other technologies as well. So again, this is why the period of 1920s was classified as a decade of hopes, lots of excitement, lots of opportunity if you can afford it, especially the middle and upper class. However, if you are a working class or poor class citizens, some of these technologies and advancements were really difficult to get a hand of. Please note that Canadian societies during this time period more have-nots than haves. Okay, just keep that in mind. More have-nots than haves. Okay, which means that a lot of citizens cannot afford these fancy new technology. Even though they were there, they were available, not many citizens have them. Okay, just keep that in mind. So we left off pretty much at this slide where I talked about giving a class a bit of background content where we took a time and we understood Canada in the 1920s. What was going on here in Canada? I classified into three groups: new leadership, new economy, and new attitudes. Okay, these were the three groups that I classified it as. Again, this is not in your textbook. This is just some additional background content that I am providing so that you will have a better, clearer understanding of what took place in Canada in the 1920s. Hello, Port Hope. How are you today?
I'm good.
It is Sophia.
Yes, it's Sophie.
Hi, Sophie. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
Anything exciting going on over in Fort Hope?
Uh, Nothing really, I guess.
Nothing really. How's the weather over there? Is it cold still?
It's snowing right now, but it's kind of warm.
Okay. Yeah, here in Sulico, we got snow last night. So we got a few centimeters of snow on the ground right now, so which is good.
Yeah.
It's been pretty warm here too. It's kind of cold here in Sulico, but today's been pretty warm, so can't complain with that. So once again, Sophie, thank you for joining in and listening Can you see my smartboard screen?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So you can see all my slides, what I'm writing, what I'm underlining, what I'm circling. Can you see all that?
Okay.
Perfect, good. Is there anyone else there at the Learning Center in Fort Hope, or is it just you today?
It's just me
Just
today.
you today, eh? Okay. I know it's early in the morning. That's okay. But then again, thank you so much for joining and listening. Again, if you have any questions, any difficulties with your assignments, let me know. I'm here to help. Okay, I will be going over again questions on assignment 3 once we get closer to the end of this lesson. Okay? So again, continue to work on assignments. Questions, just let me know. Okay? So
Alright.
Canada in the 1920s, again, new leadership, new economy, new attitude. We started off this decade with a man that pretty much no one knows of, Arthur Meighen. Arthur Meighen was Canada's Prime Minister for exactly 1 year. Then Mackenzie King took over. There's a whole scandal took place. Mackenzie King was called for the election. Our Governor General of Canada during that time period of Julian Byng refused. He invited Arthur Meighen to form government. However, Meighen accepted this job of Prime Minister, but he refused to take the oath of acting government. As a result, there was a non-vote of confidence. He was not Prime Minister. That is why he only lasted for 1 year. And Mackenzie King, boom, took over as Canada Prime Minister for the majority, pretty much all of the 1920s. Okay, so that was who was our Prime Minister during this time period. Okay, no longer Wilfrid Laurier. Okay, new government, new time period. New economy. Again, everyone wants to be rich during this time period. Again, time of excitement, time of opportunity. Okay? Here in Canada, more goods are being shipped from the United States than are Britain. Okay? Again, we had an increase in industry. Jobs were booming, jobs were opening. Hydroelectricity production were expanding as well. Again, everyone wanted to invest and get rich. Okay, that was the goal. That was the mindset of getting rich. New economy. Lastly, new attitudes during this time period. New attitudes. Modern society, we were growing. Okay, the middle class. Okay, which is like pretty much the wealthy and the common everyday citizen. The middle class. That class was growing. Okay, not everyone was rich. Not everyone was poor, but a lot of people were pretty much good to go. They were in the middle class. They had all the basic needs of a normal citizen have. That group of people of the middle class was growing. There's also improvement in school, education. Again, cities started to grow as well in terms of urbanization. And I talked about here in the 1929, we had a group called the Famous Five. The Famous Five. You may have heard of them, you may have not heard of them. The Famous Five was led by an individual, a woman named Nellie McClung. She had this movement where they wanted to gain women's rights. So she took her case to the Supreme Court of Canada and fought for, hey, women should be able to hold jobs, vote, etc., be recognized same as a citizen as a man. And they won their case, which is why in 1929, women were declared a person. Before that, women were not recognized as a person. They could not own land, house, farmland, but now they are classified as women. Very key in terms of Canadian women history time period. Again, all this is not in a textbook. I'm just providing additional content so that you will have a sense as we continue on with this lesson. So, indigenous content. Again, always my goal was to integrate as much indigenous First Nation content as much as possible. When looking at history, which is what we're looking at right now, it's really important that we look back on indigenous First Nation history and how they were involved and how they play a role in shaping the identity of Canada. So First Nation Aboriginal in the 1920s, they could not afford new fancy farming machinery. Okay, again, we talked about 1920s. Lots of opportunity, lots of advancement. However, indigenous citizens, people, could not afford these fancy technologies. There was some employment in non-Aboriginal workplace, such as logging and fishing. So we started to see some expanding away from their more traditional and non-traditional jobs as well. Okay, so this is what it was like in the 1920s for indigenous population. So how did the 1920s finish? How did it end? Okay, this 10-year period, how did it finish? So in the end, Canada in 1920s finished how did it pretty much started. Canada was caught up in a recession. Being modern is not as important as having a job, food, or shelter. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Okay, so 1920s, that 10-year period, as we start the 1930s, Canada began pretty much how it started. We caught up in a recession, okay, which is not good. Being modern, okay, meaning that having fancy things and having the latest technology is not as important as having a job, food, or shelter. Keep that in mind. Okay, people still fighting for jobs, having food, shelter. Okay, not all citizens have this. Some did, but not all. Okay, so that was pretty much how we closed out the 1920s. So boom, let's move forward to the 1930s. The 1930s. Okay, 1930s. Understanding Canada in 1930s. So some factors that we need to know what happened in the 1930s. Some key factors. 1. High tariffs. So during this period of 1930s, lots of taxes, lots of additional taxes and duties that we have to pay. Economy dependent on export. So Canada did create goods and agriculture here in Canada, but we highly depend on export from other countries, such as our neighbor down in the United States and overseas in Britain. There was overextending credits to citizens, heavy debt loans, inefficient financial regulations imposed by our government, misleading or misguided government interventions, and our public panic. People start to panic. Okay, this is what is happening. Okay, high taxes. Okay, economy dependent on exports from other countries. Overextended credits, heavy debt loans, ineffective financial regulations, misguided government interventions, and our public start to panic. Okay, start to see some crisis taking place right now at the start of the 1930s. The 1930s started with something known as the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a social and economic shock. Okay, so social and economic. Which left millions unemployed, hungry, and homeless. So the Great Depression started on October 1929 with the New York stock market crash, which left millions with no jobs. They were laid off. Companies went bankrupt. Almost 1/3 of Canadians lost their jobs. The cause of the Great Depression, people still debate about it, and the cause was still unknown, but the cause, many argue that many companies started to make more products than people could afford. As a result, When companies start to make more products than people could afford, they lose out on money. Okay? With the Great Depression, not just Canada was affected. Countries all over the world were affected. Okay? Canada had high dependence on raw material. We had heavy drought in the periods, which we'll talk about in 2 seconds. This was the kickstart of Canada in terms of the birth of social welfare. Again, people debate about the cause of the Great Depression. Okay? 1929, the Wall Street, New York stock market crash. Widespread drops in world commodity prices, supply and demand dropped in trades, and people lost their jobs. By 1933, almost 30% or 33%, as I note on my screen, did not have jobs. So again, this was the time of panic, crisis. The New York stock market crash left millions of people with no jobs. Company went bankrupt. Okay? Again, this was the social and economic crisis that took place in Canada, and it also affected everyone around the world as well. Stock market crash equals symptom of economic unsustainability. Okay? People did not know. Okay? Times of panic, time of uncertainty for everyone here in Canada. This was the Great Depression. Okay? So let's look at other factors how the Great Depression played out here in Canada. Okay? Again, we talked about how it impacted citizens in Canada, but it really impacted farmers. If you're a farmer, oh boy, it really impacted you. So farmers in the Prairie province. This is Prairie provinces. So Prairie provinces, we're talking about Manitoba, Saskatchewan, those 2 main provinces. Okay. During this time period of the early 1930s and during the period of the Great Depression, other countries produced more grains than Canada. The Prairie provinces were hit the hardest. We had something called a severe drought. Okay, for those who don't know, a drought is a period of no rain, no precipitation. This would hit hardest in Western Canada. There was no rain for 7 years. Okay? Yes, 7 years. Okay, so severe drought. Okay? So if you're a farmer growing crops in agriculture, you do need rain to help to grow those crops. But in Western Canada, there was no rain. Yes. Okay. Also, grasshopper plague. Okay. Known as like a kind of like superbug, came out of nowhere, ate pretty much all the crops that appeared. So this also impacted farmers as well. So farmers during this time period also had to rely on luck. Okay, a lot of farmers couldn't afford fuel as well. They had to hook up their farm animals to their cars, known as the Bennett buggy. Thank you for finding out my spelling error. So again, farmers couldn't afford fuel for this time period. They had to hook up their farm animals to their car. This is known as the Bennett buggies, because R.B. Bennett was Canada's prime minister during this time period. So farmers, again, tough period, no income, couldn't pay the bills, had to sell the home, lose it all. Not fun. Okay, erosion, drought, plagued by grasshopper, and along with the Great Depression, really impacted farmers in the Prairie provinces. Okay? Are there any questions so far? Any questions? Does that make sense, Sophie? Are you following along? Are there any questions right now?
No.
Perfect.
No.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, there will be a question on assignment 3 about what caused the Great Depression and how it impacted farmers as well. So these 2 slides are really key. Again, this information is in your textbook. So if you read in your textbook, it also outlines this information as well. So we talked about provinces and the prairies, but let's look at how other provinces here in Canada were impacted. This is not in your textbook, but I'm gonna provide it anyways. So how did the Great Depression impacted other provinces as well? So in British Columbia, BC, on the west coast of Canada, resources-based industry and agriculture decline. No surprise there. In Newfoundland on the east coast, they were not even a part of Canada during this time period. So that's not even a story. Quebec and Ontario, they were hit the hardest in terms of manufacturing sectors. Massive layoffs, again, lots of jobs in factories during this time period, but a lot of people were laid off. Okay, they lost their jobs. Okay, income was down about 50%. Unemployed went down by 27%. So a lot of people lost their jobs and did not make the same income as they did on a regular basis. Okay, so this is how the rest of Canada was impacted by the Great Depression. Okay, not just farmers, but pretty much everyone. But farmers and the prairies were hit the hardest. The hardest. So the 1930s, a period of challenges, government, individual, families. Okay, because of all this uncertainty and the Great Depression and people have no jobs, unemployment, it really rely on our government to do something. Hence why during this time period, there was the birth of social welfare, government relief assistance. People really depended on our government to help out. We were struggling, people lost their jobs, something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. So families, individual people started to make challenges. 1930s, not always about the Great Depression, not always about unemployment, not always about relief lines, dust storm, or hobos, but always a story about society struggles. Okay, just keep that in mind. Okay, not all about the bad things, but it's a story about how here in Canada, Canadian citizens, a story of struggles. Okay, not always about the Great Depression, unemployment, relief lines, dust storms, and hobos, but always a story of society struggles. Okay, yes, the 1930s, lots of struggles and challenges that we need to overcome. So how did the 1930s ended? How did the 1930s ended? I'm going to pose a question. That question is, how does the Great Depression change the role of government in Canada? How does the Great Depression change the role of government in Canada? Well, because of all these challenges and struggles that Canadians had to overcome, Canadians now, yes, they now expect the government to react when a financial crisis occurs by taking actions or interventions. Okay, this is what people expected now. Okay, if something's going wrong in our society, whether a Great Depression occur, people losing a job, losing incomes, couldn't afford things, we Canadians expected the government to do something about it. Okay, that was our mindset. That how change or what changed in the 1930s. We now expect a government to react when financial crises occur. That was the 1930s. So now we have an understanding of what took place and what it was like living in a lived experience in Canada in the 1920s and 1930s. We're going to look at women history and how they changed and impacted Canada society during this time period. So political concerns of women during this time period. Period of prohibition. So women during this time period had their own goals and had their own views on how society should be done. Prohibition is the ban of sales of alcohol consumption, women saw alcohol or drinking as a bad thing, a bad image in Canadian society. And women wanted to gain the right to vote. They could not vote, as we talked about prior to this course. As a result, they wanted to gain the right to vote so that they could change or influence Canadian society in their point of view. So these were the two main goals that they wanted to accomplish. Prohibition, which is the ban of sale of alcohol consumption, and gaining the right to vote, federally and provincially in provincial election. Okay, these are the two goals that they want to focus on. So let's look at these two in greater detail. The temperance movement. The temperance movement. You'll see this again in your assignments. The temperance movement was a social and political campaign. Okay, again, social and political. Social and political. Yes, that won't work. Social and political campaign. Again, their main goal was to ban the sale of alcohol. Okay, drinking was a big no-no in their point of view. They saw drinking as the responsibility of society ill. Okay, they saw that if someone was drinking alcohol or any other alcoholic beverages, they saw that as impacting Canadian society, okay, in a harmful way. Okay, the temperance movement was basically a group of women, okay, group of women, mainly white, Protestant women who wanted to pressure government to change laws. Okay, they wanted the government to do something about it, and they wanted the government to ban the sale of alcohol. Okay, these women, known as the temperance movement, they were popular across Canada, especially in major cities. Okay, all major cities in Canada all had this kind of movement starting to emerge. Okay, ideas of how to improve society. Again, not just in terms of banning alcohol consumptions, but they also wanted to improve hospitals, schools, and prison. Okay. The reason why they wanted to ban alcohol consumption was that they believed the abuse of alcohol was the cause of unemployment, disease, prostitution, poverty, and immortality in terms of society. They saw that this was a chance of men taking advantage of women, or women doing non-woman type gender role. Okay, again, believe the abuse of alcohol was the cause of unemployment, disease, prostitution, poverty, and immortality in society. Okay, this was the main goal. This was the problem that the temperance movement had, and they wanted to change it. Okay, a key group that emerged from the temperance movement was known as the Women Christian Temperance Movement. Okay, so the Women's Christian Temperance Movement was a key group that was really involved in the temperance movement. Was the temperance movement successful? Not always. Not always. Okay, it's really hard to ban the sale of alcohol consumption. Okay, there's underground sales, bootlegging, smugglers, okay, other factors too. So getting rid of alcohol completely was a really hard task. A really, really hard task. Okay, they pose all these suggestions to our government in order to change society in terms of their viewpoint. Did the government listen? Pretty much no. The government seemed to ignore all their suggestions. Okay, the temperance movement, these group of women saw that the only way that they can improve society in their viewpoint was to gain the right to vote. Gain the right to vote. They want to gain the right to vote. Yes, my smartboard marker is not working today. They held demonstrations, collected name on petitions, they wrote articles in newspapers, letters, magazines, and how their viewpoint was beneficial. Okay? But again, the government pretty much ignored the suggestions, didn't really listen. That's why gaining the right to vote was significant. Okay, again, as you recall, women during this time period could not vote. They could not vote. Okay, but that will soon change. That will soon change. When the vote was won. When the vote was won. So prior to all this lesson, we talked about limitations, struggles, challenges, barriers that Canadian women had to overcome. Okay, women were strictly known as the angel in the house, where they were in the private sphere of in the home. They were not allowed in the public sphere of being outside the home. They were limited to working only domestic service roles such as cooking, cleaning, maiding, etc. Women did not have the right to vote. Women did not have the right to own land, property, all that. Okay, but this all changed. Okay, and the temperance movement kind of helped change this. Okay, so on my screen, as you can see, I have a list of Canadian provinces, and beside are the dates of when women won the year the woman won the right to vote. The year that women won the right to vote. As you can see, each province, women provincially won the right to vote different years. But in 1917, the federal government, federally, most women could vote during this time period. Not all, but some. Okay, please, you can note that some provinces gained the right to vote later than others, such as PEI in 1922 and Quebec in the 1940s. Okay, so women won the right to vote federally in 1917 or 1918, nearly all, but provincially it took place different years. However, not all women were equal. Not all women had the right to vote, even they won the right to vote. In, for example, in 1917 or 1918. Aboriginal women were denied the right to vote until 1960. Okay, so if you were a First Nation woman during this time period, they could not vote until 1960. Okay, there were other barriers, factors, racism took place as well. Asian women, like Asian men, were disenfranchised until the late 1940s. Okay, people of different ethnicity, race from different countries, they were denied the right to vote until the late 1940s. Okay, so yeah, these are all the years that women won the right to vote provincially and federally. Provincially, all different time period. Federally, 1917 and 1918. Okay, so that was pretty much the temperance movement, what their goals were, and how it helped women to win the right to vote. Key points in terms of Canadian women history being recognized as a person. On my screen, you'll see a little illustration, a little timeline. This is in your textbook as well. Okay, it just outlines all the different years of how women recognition, rights, equality, as a person changed throughout the years. Okay, so in the late 1890s, women cannot own farmlands and prairies. They were begin to try to enter into certain jobs but face huge barriers. In the early 1900s, okay, women pioneers on prairies worked with men to create successful farms. Women had little control over property. Okay, so you can see how it changed throughout the years. Okay, 1910, women fought for the right to vote, worked in factories, especially in World War I, because men will oversee. Women gained the right to vote. Federally, provincially, declared a person. Remember the famous five in 1929. Okay, women suffer with families during the Great Depression. Low-paying jobs. Okay, and as you work your way up near towards the 1970s and 1980s, you can see that women started to enter jobs such as like medicine and government, start taking over businesses and men's jobs, equality. Okay, so women's rights and equality has progressed greatly throughout the year. Okay, there are probably still some challenges nowadays that women still face, but you can see the great gains and strides that they have played throughout the years. Okay, so this illustration and picture is in your textbook. Okay, that pretty much wraps up today's lesson on Canada 1920s, 1930s, and pretty much wrap things up in terms of lesson number 1. Okay, are there any questions? Any confusion before we looked at questions on assignment number 3? Sophie, are you finished assignment 3? Or are you still working on assignment 3?
I'm still working on.
Still working on it? Okay. So right now, I'm going to take some time to go over questions on assignment 3. So if you want to flip through that in your workbook and see if any questions doesn't make sense to you, or you don't know where the answer is, or whatnot, this is the perfect time, because I'm going to go over these questions, and if you're stuck on anything, I can help you to clarify it. Okay? So assignment number 3 is out of 29 marks. Okay? One of your biggest assignment throughout this course. Okay, so don't be surprised. Nothing new is going to change here. Question number 1 asks, name 3 items after invention that people started to acquire in the 1920s. Okay, don't just give me 1 or 2. I'll look for 3 items. Okay, 3 items, 3 inventions that people started to acquire in the 1920s. That's out of 1 mark. Okay. Then still write in full, complete sentences. Details are still required. Question number 2. Boom, out of 5 big marks. What happened to cause the Great Depression? Okay. The Great Depression in the late 1920s. Do you think we could ever have another Great Depression? Why or why not? Okay, so your job for this question is to tell me what was the Great Depression, how it started, its purpose, its goal, etc. Okay, details about the Great Depression. It's in your textbook, it's in my slide, we talked about it today. And then tell me if you think, do you think, not what I think, but what do you think if we could have another Great Depression? Why or why not? Explain. Okay? There's no right or wrong answer for this one, as long as you explain why you feel that way. Okay? But if you go off topic and talk about something that's totally irrelevant and makes no sense, then you won't get marks. Okay? So what happened to cause the Great Depression? Tell me why, and tell me if you think another one could happen today. Why or why not? Yes or no, basically. Okay, 5 marks. Okay, lots of details for that one. Question number 3. Describe the challenge of farmers during the Great Depression. Okay, again, we talked about it, how farmers had to overcome huge barriers. For example, droughts. For example, grasshopper, can't afford land, had to sell land, hooking up their farm animals to the car. Okay, describe the challenges of farmers during the Great Depression. Okay, farmers. Okay, think the prairies. Okay, think the prairies. Out of farm marks. Question number 4. Use a chart on the next page to outline the difference between opportunities of men and women in the early 1900s. Okay, we're talking about men and we're talking about women. We're comparing. Okay, compare and contrast. Just compare. Okay, so in your workbook, you'll see this chart. Okay, where it has 3 different columns and 3 different rows. Okay, you are to compare what it's like to be a woman and men during this time period. Okay, in terms of education, employment, and family role. Okay, for this question and this question only, okay, class, you can use jot notes, you can use port form. That's okay. I will accept that. All this is on page 8 in your textbook, okay, where it talks about women and men and how their roles in terms of gender were the same, different, and whatnot. Okay, so for example, in education, did women have education? Yes, no, maybe so. Men, did they have education? Did they go to college? Did they go to university? Stuff like that. Okay, employment, jobs. Okay, what kind of jobs did women have during this time period? Okay, cooking, cleaning, maiding. What kind of jobs did men have? Factories, doctors, etc. Okay, family roles in terms of gender specific. What did women do? Take care of the kids, cooking, cleaning. Okay, what did men do in terms of family role? The men have to cook, clean, provide income for family. Okay, this is what I'm looking for in terms of this question, question number 4. Okay, for this chart. Okay, all the information is in your textbook on page 8. Question number 5. Outline the purpose women have for the Temperance movement. Here we go again. Temperance movement. What was the goal? What was the purpose of the Temperance movement? What they wanted to do. Okay, prohibition, ban the sale of alcohol, because it created a bad image for society, and they wanted to gain the right to vote. What else did they focus on besides those 2 factors? Okay, besides banning alcohol and gaining the right to vote. Question number 6. Why did women feel it was important for them to get the right to vote? Okay, why did women feel it was important for them to get to vote? Okay, the government did something. Okay, did the government listen? Did the government agree? Okay, this is what the question is asking for. The government. Okay. Whew. Smartboard pen is definitely not working. What? Yeah, pen is giving me some problems today. But yes, what did the government do for this question? Let's keep that in mind. What did the government do? Okay. Why it was important for them to get the right to vote. Question number 7. Ooh, big assignment. Describe how women acquire the right to vote provincially compared to acquiring the right to vote federally. Okay. How did women acquire the right to vote? What did women do? And how is it compared in terms of provincially and federally? Okay, for this one, look at the years. Were the years the same? Different in terms of provincially and federally? Okay, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. And question number 8. The last one. 5 big marks. Comment on women's rights today. Not last year, but today. Okay? Comment on women's rights. Compare it to the early 1900s and describe the eras of education, employment, and family role. These are the 3 eras that you must talk upon for this question. Okay? So compare. Okay? The same and different. Compare and contrast. Women's rights today compared to the early 1900s. Did women go to school? Did women have jobs? What kind of jobs do women have? What kind of family roles did women do? What are the expectations nowadays compared to women back then? Okay? And that, class, is assignment number 3. Okay, once you finish assignment 3, boom, lesson number 1 is finished. Okay? Are there any questions, confusions, anything you want me to go over in terms of this lesson, in terms of this assignment number 3? Sophie, are you still there with me in Fort Hope?
Yep, I am.
Okay, good. Everything makes sense so far? Everything's good to go?
Yeah, everything makes sense.
Okay. I did receive assignment 1 and assignment 2 from you, and I did mark that. Did you see your mark from that I sent you on Facebook?
Not just.
Not yet. Check your inbox in Facebook. Your messages on Facebook. Okay, so you log onto your Facebook page. I did attach it. Okay, I did give it to your DEC as well. So you're not sure of what you did or what your marks were on assignment 1, assignment 2. Talk to your DC or let me know again and I can send that to you again. But you did extremely well in terms of assignment 1 and assignment 2. No problems. Continue to work on assignment 3. Okay, Sophie? You're doing a great job so far. You're coming to class every single week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is fantastic. Continue to do that. Okay? Not just come to my classes and listen in, but continue to read the textbook as well. And this applies to pretty much everyone. Okay? All the students. Okay? Are there any questions before we wrap things up? So again, this pretty much wraps things up on Canada in terms of lesson number 1. Okay? We're going to switch gear and move on to lesson number 2 on Thursday, where we'll be looking at Canada in World War II.